Hi everyone, welcome back to my A Tale of Stars and Shadow read-along. Today we are jumping into chapter 10, so let's get right into it. She spent a mostly sleepless night trying not to focus on her fears, and eventually gave up just before dawn. Opening the front door revealed a glowing pink horizon. Mist hugged the treetops of the hillside directly across from the walkway outside. Allowing the simple beauty of her surroundings to calm some of her edginess, she stood at the railing for a few moments, taking slow, deep breaths of the flower-scented air. A handful of winged folk swooped by overhead, dropping almost close enough for her to touch before disappearing around the side of the hill. She craned her neck, fascinated to watch them in flight, but they didn't return. By the time she'd eaten, there'd been a large supply of fresh bread, cheese, fruit, and dried food left for her in a cupboard, though she supposed she'd be eating at the barracks mess once it ran out. And changed into her sleeveless uniform. The sun had risen fully into the sky, moving from warm to hot on her bare shoulders. Amazingly, she managed to find her way to the barracks without help. They were all there, waiting, sitting well apart from each other once again, and with expressions ranging from mutinous to bored. "Tyak," she waved him over. "Captain? I want you to run them through basic warm-ups and then beginner sword drills. Nothing complicated. I just want to see what they look like." He scratched his head, looking like he wanted to protest, but in the end nodded and turned away from her. Tyak drilled them for an hour while Talyn stretched and ran through her Callan and agility exercises. Part of her attention focused on her movements, the remainder on the progress of her men. It was quickly apparent that Talyn was the only one who had any knowledge whatsoever of how to use a sword. He burst out laughing when Zamril wrapped his hand around the hilt of his new sword as gingerly as if he were picking up a dangerous snake, then proceeded to drop it as soon as Tyak tapped the blade with his own. The thief flushed scarlet in mortification and bent to pick it back up, holding it in a white-knuckled grip this time. Halun waved his training sword about as if it were a 50-pound club, while Corin merely looked terrified he might hurt someone with his. Worse, they were slow to follow orders, in some cases because they didn't understand Thyak's instructions, and in others because they quite obviously didn't want to do what he was asking them to. Tyak barked non-stop. It was clear that he was angry about more than just the lack of skill and discipline being demonstrated. When he finally called a halt, Talyn joined them, running a critical eye over the group. Talyn was breathing easily, and Tyak was mastering his fatigue manfully, despite being dangerously red in the face. Corin looked pale, his arms trembling, and once again his gaze was firmly on his shoes. Zamril was flushed and had a sour look plastered over his face. Halun sweated profusely and sucked in air with big gulps, presumably well used to heavy work, but not stamina training. They all held their blades warily, without a trace of the proper stances and footwork that she was accustomed to seeing at drill. Talyn was a little better than the rest, but from what she'd observed, seemed to forgo discipline for showiness. As she faced them, she was momentarily at a loss. Since her childhood, from riding with the Aimsier to her Callan apprenticeship to the Kingshield, she had trained amongst the best warriors in her country. She had absolutely no experience with raw recruits who were essentially forced conscripts, something that wouldn't even happen in the Twin Thrones. The silence became drawn out, and it took her a few moments to realize they were picking up her sense of hopelessness. Corin's shoulders drooped, while Zamril's tired expression turned sneering. "I told you we were worthless. Maybe you should just send us back to the cells now and be done with it." His defeatist attitude stung Talyn's temper. "If you talk like that, of course you're going to be useless. None of the skilled warriors I know lack confidence. Except me, but I'm going to get it back. I have to get it back." "We're not skilled warriors," Zamril countered. "If you think we're useless, then why should we think differently?" Corin said in a small voice. "We can tell from the way you and Tyak look at us." Halun merely dropped his sword and crossed his arms over his chest, glare firmly in place. "Don't be so sure." Talyn took a breath. "All the fine warriors I know didn't start out that way. Neither did I, when it comes down to it. We just have to start from the beginning and work hard." Tyak grunted, but the others just looked at their shoes. Talyn gritted her teeth and forced back irritation, one step at a time. "How are the barracks? Comfortable enough for you?" "They'll do," Tyak grunted. "Actually, I couldn't find my money pouch this morning." Talyn threw a dark glance at Zamril. "I don't suppose anybody knows where it is." "Are you insinuating that I took it?" Zamril snapped. "Well, I don't know. You are our resident thief," Talyn said. "You probably lost it, you flea-bitten, feathered moron." "How dare you call me a moron?" Talyn flushed an angry red. "Remember your place, human." Letting out an inarticulate shout of anger, Zamril threw himself at Talyn. The winged man was taken by surprise and fell backwards with the force of Zamril's charge. They hit the ground and rolled over and over, throwing punches that mostly didn't land and wrestling for the upper hand. The warrior part of Talyn frowned when Talyn didn't even try to use his wings to help him fight, allowing the much smaller and warier Zamril to get the upper hand. She let them at it for a few moments, then when they staggered to their feet, still wrestling, she moved. Swooping down to pick up Halun's dropped training sword, she cracked Zamril hard on the back with it, then gripped the collar of his shirt, trying to pull them apart. When he ignored her tugging and they continued to brawl, a careless elbow nearly catching her in the jaw, she kicked Zamril hard in the back of his right knee, forcing the leg to fold under him. Then, as he dropped, she stepped around, drove her elbow into Talyn's solar plexus and sent him staggering back. Before he could right himself, she drew her sai, spinning it till the morning sunlight glinted brightly on the blade. "Either of you keep going and I start removing important body parts," she snapped. Talyn froze into instant stillness while Zamril stumbled to his feet, glowering and rubbing the back of his knee. "Thiak!" she bellowed, and the veteran reluctantly stepped forward to stand between the two men. Blood flowed from Zamril's nose, and both he and Talyn sported darkening bruises on their cheekbones. Their chests heaved and sweat soaked through their clothes, making a pitiful sight. "Zamril, did you take the money?" Talyn asked him. "No," he said, tugging up the hem of his threadbare shirt to swipe at his bleeding nose. "I didn't take anything." "Do you promise to never steal from anyone in this wing?" She lifted her hand as he opened his mouth. "And before you answer, you better damn well mean it. I told you yesterday, these men are your comrades. We don't insult each other and we don't steal from each other. Trust is imperative." "I don't trust them," he muttered. "Zamril," she shouted, "if you don't start showing some slither of cooperation, so help me, I will send you straight back to that cell. I won't tolerate any further insubordination from you. Am I clear?" "All right," he said sulkily. "I promise I won't steal from anyone in this wing. You have my word." "Talyn," Talyn rounded on him, "you do not go around making accusations about fellow members of your wing without solid proof. Am I clear?" "Whatever." He brushed the dirt off his shoulders, flaring his wings to shed them of leaves too. She levelled him with a look. "You don't have to be here either. I'm just as happy to have 0 winged folk in my wing, so feel free to fly off right now if you can't follow my orders and be a part of this team. Am I clear?" He stiffened, his pretty face flinching at whatever must be written in her expression, but he gave her a sharp nod. "Yes, Captain." There'd been a hint of fear in his eyes at her words, and she wondered at the source of it. The question of why he was the only falcon here nagged at her. She dismissed the curiosity for now, keeping her voice cold as she widened her gaze to address them all. "I will not tolerate infighting in this wing. We will be relying on each other for our lives. Thiak, do you agree?" "This isn't a wing," he said darkly, glowering at her. "This is a flea-bitten rabble." She stepped up to him, lowering her voice so that only he could hear. In the heat of her anger and frustration, she'd recaptured a flash of who she'd once been, utterly implacable in the face of attitude. Combined with her natural Dumnoric's charisma, it was difficult to stand up to, and she used it on him ruthlessly. "You are my second. That means you back me up in front of the wing, and you help me when I'm trying to break up a fight. If you aren't prepared to be a second, you can leave. Now." He stared mutinously at her, jaw set. "Make your choice," she said evenly. "I'll stay," he jerked his head. "Don't make me do this again," she warned. "I won't give you a choice next time. I may be a woman, but I'm not soft." "Understood," he growled. Talyn stepped back, taking a breath to calm herself before turning back to the group. Anger could be used, but it needed to be controlled too. "Zamril, Talyn, if it happens again, you'll both be out. That goes for the rest of you if you try and pull the same thing. Being here is an opportunity for all of you. It may not be the one that you want or that you like, but it is a damn sight better than rotting in those cells, so start acting like it." They nodded, feet shuffling, eyes on the ground. She almost allowed herself to roll her eyes. Was this truly what command was like? It felt more like what she imagined parenting small children would be. "Captain, can I ask you a question?" Corin asked hesitantly. She let out a long breath, using it to calm herself. "You can ask me anything." "Would you tell us about the badge on your chest?" he pointed. Taken aback, she glanced down, reaching up to trace her fingers over the little stars. "The crossed swords is the Dumnoric sigil. The King's Shield, Callanan, and army all wear this to reflect that. The colour matches the eye colour of the current monarch. The Dumnoric's family have quite striking and brightly coloured eyes, like starlight, hence this emblem is stitched from stars." "Your king has amber eyes?" Talyn asked, sounding as curious as Corin now. Yes, that's right. Zamril was next, frowning in confusion. Why did you join the King's Shield, he asked. You have the skills of a great warrior. Why waste them protecting a king or a prince? The Dumnorics are worth protecting. They devote their lives to looking after all their people, she said simply, realizing the words sounded trite, but utterly unwilling to explain the real reason she'd joined the King's Shield. It is an honour to protect and serve their family. Zamril let out a scornful laugh. His raking glance suggested he knew she was lying through her teeth. An admirable king who protects his people, Thyek muttered angrily. A hopeful thought indeed. I think you live in some sort of dream world, Captain. Having had a stomach full of black looks and bitterness, Talyn decided to end the conversation there. Training is over for this morning. You will spend the remainder of the day finishing sweeping and clearing this yard. If I see one leaf or speck of dust on this ground tomorrow morning, I will make you clean it again. She tried to quell her frustration with them, but it was a losing battle. Dismissed. I didn't do anything wrong, Corin frowned, glaring in Zamril's direction. Halun growled, presumably in agreement, crossing his brawny arms over his chest. What happens to the wing affects the entire wing, she said. You'll all clean together. Perhaps next time Zamril and Talyn won't be in such a hurry to insult each other. Now get to it. Looking insolent and irritated, they shuffled off towards the barracks. Talyn doubted that the yard would be cleaned very well, but at least they were doing as she asked. Sort of. You! She snapped at Thyek as he turned to follow the others. He turned and raised an eyebrow, not even bothering to address her by rank. She sighed. Thyek, we need to instill confidence and a sense of teamwork in them. They will look to you because of your experience and because I'm a woman and they don't trust me yet. I never asked them to. If you'd like to make this difficult for me, then fine. But I warn you, Thyek, I will succeed here. Thyek spread his arms, a bitter grin crossing his face. I'm not going to stop you from trying, and I'll do my job. Just don't expect any more than that, Captain. Get out of here, she snapped. He turned and walked away. Talyn let out a breath. Threatening people to make them obey her wasn't her ideal choice, but she wasn't averse to it if necessary. That was expertly handled. I don't know why you keep doubting yourself. Get out of my head, she snarled, before stalking out of the yard. A falcon sent by Ravinire was waiting for Talyn as she arrived back at her room. She followed him to the Wingguard commander's quarters via another confusing route that took her not far north of Huon's tower. If she remembered Talyn's explanation from the day before correctly, that would place her almost adjacent to the Queen's rooms. She tried her best to memorize the route, but wasn't sure she'd succeeded. The Falcon barracks were sprawling and busy. 2 wings drilled in a large yard not unlike her own, while another wing filled the sky above, practicing aerial maneuvers. Their musical voices drifted in the warm midday air. Ravinire's quarters took up half of the top floor of the barracks building, while the other half held a series of offices, presumably occupied by his staff. The working space was much less cluttered than her experience of Callanan Tower and the King's Shield offices at home. Here, the space seemed designed around the fact that all of its occupants had wings that could easily topple anything fragile and would be cramped with too much furniture around. Instead, there were only a handful of tables and none of the chairs had backs. Parchment was kept inside boxes so that piles couldn't be carelessly swept away by an unfurling wing, and the ceiling was high. She liked it. It gave the otherwise busy working area a sense of breathing space, especially given how hot the air was. Her falcon guide rapped sharply on a half-open door, then pushed it open when a voice inside told them to enter. Talyn stepped in to find a pair of suspicious brown eyes staring at her from a winged man sitting behind a desk. The desk was the only furniture in the room, and the chair was more like a stool. The falcon is waiting for you, he said, tone bordering on rude. She ignored the tone and the look, simply giving a friendly nod before crossing the small space and opening the only other door. A large office lay beyond, floor-to-ceiling glass directly behind Ravinire's desk, offering a view over 3 hillside buildings she was fairly confident were the Queen's quarters. There was another door to her immediately left, firmly closed. Otherwise, the room was sparse apart from the desk and 2 backless chairs sitting before it. 2 boxes of parchment sat at his right and left hands. Good morning, Captain Dynan. Ravinire looked up. Please take a seat. She did as asked, her posture stiffer than usual without the back of a chair to lean against. Good morning, sir. As you've now had a day to settle in, I would like to discuss my expectations from you for the year that you are with us. He gave her a wry look. As you've already pointed out, the Crown paid dearly for the benefit of your presence here, and I'd like to make sure the investment isn't wasted. Yes, sir. Good. Some firm boundaries and expectations. Maybe they would help her feel less like she was floundering. For a start, 5 men is not a wing. You cannot protect Prince Huon at all times with only half a single detail. I agree, sir. However, Unless you can provide me with some trained fighters, I don't have enough resources to train more than 5 men at one time. The Wing Guard has no additional resources for you, Captain, he said. I can provide more pardonables. No, sir, she shook her head. I can't effectively train more than 5 raw recruits at a time, particularly those that have no desire to be soldiers and are only doing this because the alternative facing them is jail. He said nothing for a moment, his expression unreadable as his gaze studied her. It almost seemed he was searching for something. She kept her expression equally bland, and it was impossible to tell whether he found what he was looking for. I will accept that for now, he said. However, both Theak and Tierslin are trained fighters. Use them to expedite your training requirements. If you aren't able to build an effective protection wing, then there's no purpose in you being here. There it is, Tal. He doesn't want you here, and he's looking for a reason to get rid of you, or convince whoever asked for you to get rid of you. Fail at this, and he has his reason. Talyn took a breath. Sari was correct. What he was asking was impossible, yet she read clearly the implicit warning in his words. She either did as he asked, or she was going to be sent back home, Izerdi or no. Yes, sir, I'll do my best. I thought you liked him, she muttered. I just said he was honest. Helpful. Talyn returned her attention to Ravinire as he spoke again. Good. Now how did your meeting with Prince Kewin go? Not well, sir. He insists he doesn't need a protective detail and refused to allow me to remain as his guard in the interim before the men could be trained up. She spoke honestly. I would appreciate any advice you could give me on how best to handle that. Prince Kewin is a difficult subject, Ravinire agreed. Should it become necessary, I will talk to the Queen. For now, given you don't have enough for a detail anyway, I think it better you devote your time to training up the men. We'll revisit once you have a functioning detail. Thank you, sir, she shifted. He'd already shut her down once, but she was going to try again. Is there anything I should know about the security environment here, particularly as it pertains to Prince Kewin? I want to do everything I can to fulfill my duties. I'm sure you've worked out for yourself that there are certain tensions between the Dock City population and the Citadel, but those tensions have always been there. I don't truly believe the humans pose a specific threat to Prince Kewin or anyone in the royal family, Ravinire said. Should the Wing Guard be made aware of any such threats, I will of course let you know. Yes, sir, she hesitated. She was already pushing him, but she needed to know something. So she summoned as courteous a tone as she could manage. May I ask the reason a Kingshield liaison was requested at this particular time? He watched her again, the moment dragging out, until she felt the need to clarify. Instead of being placed with your wing guard to assist in training them in the specifics of personal protection, I've been asked to create a new wing for the Queen's youngest son. I would have thought it more logical to assign me to the Queen's unit, or even the eldest princes, to help improve their skills. Given that, I assume there's a particular danger that has developed recently where Prince Kewin is concerned, and that's what prompted your Queen to reach out to the Twin Thrones. It was a shot in the dark, but his face gave her no indication whether it had landed. You'll find that what you might consider logical for the Twin Thrones is quite different to what makes sense in Mithranar. He finally looked away, shifting his attention to the papers on his desk. I've already answered your questions. If and when there is a threat to Prince Kewin, you will be advised. Dismissed, Captain. Her thoughts ran busily as she departed the Wingguard barracks, left to her own devices to find her way back. Ravinire told her the previous day that he'd been wanting Kewin to have a protective detail for some time, yet she had the distinct impression this whole thing was more about setting her an impossible task so he could have a good reason to send her packing, or convince whoever wanted her there to send her home. Maybe it's not that nefarious. Perhaps he's put you in the youngest prince's guard to test you, see whether you're any good. Maybe even to see if he can trust you before he lets you train his soldiers. That made sense. He clearly hadn't been the one behind the request to bring her here, and she tended to agree with Sari's assessment that he was a fair and honest leader. If she proved herself useful, then good. He'd use her expertise. If not, he could send her home at the end of the year, no harm, no foul. Experiment over. Maybe it's both. He could be looking for excuses to get rid of me while also testing to see how good I am. Agreed. The more interesting question is why the Callanan are so interested in this Shadowhawk character that they asked Sienna to send you here. Maybe that was the one question she could answer. Some dedicated investigation should yield results there. Talyn stopped walking suddenly, staring around her and realizing she was lost. Damn it. She briefly considered flagging down one of the passing winged folk, but given their reaction to her arrival, she was loath to own up to being lost. No, she would find her own way, no matter how long it took or how many ladders she had to clamber up or down. And she'd use it as an opportunity to start learning her way around this damn labyrinth of a hill city. It took her a full turn, but she made it out of the Citadel and down into Dock City. Dusk was falling, the air still thick and warm, but now outlined in a hazy orange glow. She'd considered checking on her wing before leaving the Citadel, but after their interaction earlier, she wasn't sure she could face another helping of bad attitude. Half of her was afraid she'd find them utterly disobeying her order to clean. That would force her into carrying out her threat to send them back, and then she'd have no wing. Ravinire would most certainly see that as a failure. Fear clawed at her chest, and she tried to fight it down. She hadn't failed yet. At least in walking through Dock City, she wasn't subjected to the regular looks of derision or contempt she got in the Citadel. In fact, a man closing up his store for the day was more than happy to point her in the direction of the city patrol station in the market quarter. The building was almost identical to the headquarters in the wealthy quarter, just smaller. 2 patrolmen sat at the front desk. These 2 wore crisp uniforms and seemed to be paying attention to their surroundings, which was an improvement on the 2 she'd met when choosing her detail the previous day. "Can we help you?" the one on the left asked politely. "My name is Talyn. I'm looking for Watch Officer Tye. Is he here?" The patrolman rose from his seat. "He's back in his office. I'll go and get him for you." Dark-skinned with neatly cut black curls, Tye had brown eyes that were full of curiosity as he appeared through a door to her left. He also barely reached her shoulder. "King Shield Dynan," he greeted her, an edge of puzzlement to his polite tone. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to ask about the thieves I helped catch the other day. What happened to them?" "2 are already out. They'll be on work crew duty for 2 weeks to clear the slate. The one who threw the knife at you has gone to the city jail. He'll be there for several months, I expect." A small smile. "Normally the Shadowhawk gets his people out before that can happen, but in this case I expect he took exception to the knife throwing." At the flash of confusion on Talyn's face, Tye continued, "He won't like that one of his people used a weapon to attack you. Beats me how he hears about these details, but there you go." Interesting. She needed to know more. "Do you have time for me to buy you a drink? I'm going to be here in Mithranar for a while, and there's clearly a lot for me to learn. If I'm going to do my job properly, I want to learn as quick as I can." He gave her a knowing look. "I don't suppose the winged folk locked up in the Citadel have been too welcoming to a human." He looked around, as if assuring himself all was quiet. "I'm on duty tonight, but I have some time for a break. If we go to the inn just around the corner, the lads will come and get me if there's any trouble." The inn was clearly a hot spot for off and on-duty patrolmen, and most of its patrons had a wave or shouted greeting for Tye as they entered. Music was playing in the background, just a man and woman playing a merry tune on flute and fiddle. "If you don't mind me asking, what is your job here?" he asked as the drinks were placed in front of them, Tye ordering a cold juice rather than ale. The Condor family requested a King Shield liaison to assist in training the Wing Guard in close protection skills. We provide personal protection in the Twin Thrones. The Falcon has asked me to develop a wing for Prince Kewin's protection." Tye frowned. "I don't pretend to understand winged folk thinking, but I suppose it makes sense they'd eventually get around to creating a wing for Prince Kewin. Though why they're asking a foreign warrior to do it escapes me. The winged folk aren't ones for respecting those without wings." "As has been impressed upon me strongly so far," she muttered. He flashed her a warm smile. "I bet. Can I ask what the Twin Thrones gets out of this?" Talyn eyed him in satisfaction. The man wasn't a dullard. That would make him an even better informant. "A very pricey shipment of Izurdia." "I see. You must be very good at what you do." He tipped his glass towards her in genuine acknowledgement. "Go ahead and ask your questions, Captain." "First question." Talyn kept her voice casual but interested. "The Shadowhawk is a criminal, yet from what I've seen so far, you all like him. The Falcon said something to me about half the city patrol being in his pocket." "Like's not the right word." Tye sipped his drink. "And half is a massive exaggeration. You've been here, 2 days? So you've already had a taste of what things are like here. Between the humans and winged folk, I mean." "You could say that." "It's more than just sentiment. Mithranar is not a resource-rich country, and apart from our Izurdia, the copper mines, and wood we export, we are reliant for most things on trade from other places. The winged folk look after themselves first, and then the humans, and because of their opulent lifestyle, they don't spend any more than they absolutely have to." Tye's face turned sober. "It means we, the humans, don't always get the food or other essentials we need. The Shadowhawk's activities address that problem. There are times when the supplies he and his network steals are the only things stopping parts of Dock City population from starving." Talyn considered him a moment. "So the city patrol is sympathetic to him?" "The city patrol is a lot of things." Tye gave a bitter laugh. "The winged folk don't much care for how we police ourselves, as long as what happens down here doesn't affect them up there. Some of us are sympathetic to the Shadowhawk, yes. Some of us take bribes or other incentives from the Falcons to help catch the Shadowhawk, or for other reasons. Some care about enforcing the laws, others not so much." And you're one of the ones who cares, Talyn said to herself. You're certainly the most helpful patrolman I've met so far. I heard the Falcon asked you to take on particles for your new wing. Tye traced a finger over the grooves worn deep into the wooden tabletop. I'm glad you picked Parkson. He's not. Another quicksilver smile flashed over Tye's face. He trained me. He was patrol captain of the Porkwater when I first started. And I won't lie, there's a good reason he was thrown out. But none of it was because he was one of the patrolmen I talked about who liked to take bribes. There was a message in there, but she was hesitant to probe further. Tye had already told her a lot, and she didn't want to push him too far. He could be a useful source if she handled this correctly. So instead she offered an appreciative nod as he drained his juice. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me, Watch Officer. It's been extremely helpful, but I don't want to hold you up if you're on duty. Can I walk you back? Andres, please. He rose as she did. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have as you settle in, Captain. Mithranar is a strange enough place for those of us who have lived here our whole lives. I may take you up on that. They walked back out into the street. Immediately a wave of warm night air enveloped them. Sweat prickled on her skin. Until next time, then. He offered that quick smile again as they stopped outside the patrol building, then turned and took the steps two at a time. She turned back to survey the busy street, and a sigh escaped her. It was going to be a long walk back up that blasted wall. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 10. I'll give you a moment to drop out before I start my author commentary, because there are usually always spoilers in there. If you are dropping out here, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Please consider liking and subscribing below. Otherwise, let's jump into some chat about Chapter 10. Okay, so there were 3 different scenes in this very long chapter, and I've just had a quick break to have some sips of water, so hopefully my voice will hold up for this. Firstly, another kind of interaction with Talyn, between Talyn and her new wolves. No one's attitude has improved since the last time, and once again Talyn is really having to push and control and push and work really hard essentially to kind of start building the basic foundations of discipline. She's doing that without Theak's cooperation, when things would be much easier if she kind of had him willingly acting as her second. Talyn and Zamrul going at each other in the yard because Talyn's being an arrogant little shit, and so is Zamrul. And she's finding this hard because this is completely outside her experience. She comes from a warrior culture in the Twin Thrones where there's a lot of respect for what they do and why they do it. So being faced with a bunch of people who are so dismissive and so contemptible at the idea of protecting the royal family is really difficult for her to manage, because she doesn't know how to relate to that, essentially. And so for the moment is just relying on being very firm and being very direct and kind of having to exert her will more than she would probably ideally like to. But that remains a work in progress. And in this scene, we already see a slight improvement. Like, she still feels that sense of hopelessness there, but she's also starting to feel a bit more like herself as she's really coming to the fore, and they're essentially setting her temper off. And then we have the conversation with her and Ravinire. Ravinire is quite a mysterious character, not just in this book, but throughout. And he, as those who have read the series through know that he's very loyal to Queen Serana. So even though Talyn hasn't worked out his motives yet, we know that he operates from a position of protecting the Queen and doing what she needs. She's the reason Talyn is there, she and Anron together, because they both feel Kewin needs protection as Mithranar society heads toward potentially a succession crisis, where Serana perhaps feels that it's time to start thinking about what happens when she dies, and what will happen with Mithranar and how he might behave or act once she's out of the picture. Because at this point, it's essentially a no-brainer that Mithranar will, even though it's not direct succession in Mithranar, it's just not even considered any other option that Mithranar will take the throne. And so Serana and Anron is starting to think about what happens to Kewin then, and getting some protection in place for him. And Ravinire doesn't necessarily know any of this, but this is the order he's been given from the Queen, and that results in his interactions with Talyn, where he's not really thrilled about her being there, but he's doing what his Queen wants. And so from Talyn's perspective, he's been pretty opaque and unhelpful, and she's just trying to figure out where the threat is coming from, because if you're building a guard and protection detail, you need to understand what it is you're protecting against. So another kind of frustrating meeting for Talyn, frustrating for Ravinire too, because he's not seeing the point in any of this. He's just following orders. And then Talyn, in the third scene in this chapter, Talyn starts to take the initiative in terms of the investigation into the Shadowhawk. She's doing her Callanan job of starting to look at who she can recruit as an informant or more informants to start helping her unravel that puzzle. She goes straight to Andres Tye, who is the kind of helpful looking city patrol officer that first day when she hunted down the 3 thieves. And as we all know, Andres is one day going to become one of the wolves. He's one of the good guys. And they kind of hit it off and have an easy report straight away. And he helps her to understand some aspects of how things work in Mithranar, and gives her the first hints of what this Shadowhawk's motivations are and why he's doing what he's doing and what kind of impact that has on Mithranar society. So we kind of end this chapter in a slightly hopeful note from Talyn's perspective. She's inching forward, still has that kind of sense of hopelessness and fatalism, but that's very, very slowly starting to lighten. And as we know from reading, that will continue to do so. But a big chapter, lots happening. If you have any questions about any of the characters or any of the bits and pieces in the scene, this chapter, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to answer. And hopefully I should be heading straight into chapter 11 very soon. We've got another Talyn chapter. I'm excited to keep going. Thank you so much for sticking with me this far. I hope you're really enjoying it. If there's any suggestions you have about these videos or things that you'd like me to address specifically in the author comments, comment below. I'd love to hear it. Have a great day, guys.